So we're going to talk about equitable services. We're going to talk about consultation requirements, funding options, allowable activities, and the state ombudsman. And actually, our state ombudsman is Barb. And she is the liaison between all of our title grants, Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the non-public schools. So she is definitely somebody you need to get to know. And we're going to take some time for some questions and answers at the end, but if you have questions during the presentation that are more timely, certainly we will address them at that time. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to one of my team members, Heather Sowers, who is going to do a little survey with you to kind of see what you know, kind of like to evaluate what you already know.
So we're going to start with a little game. Have you seen Kahoot being used in your schools before? Raise your hand if you've seen it before. Okay, a couple people. For those of you that haven't seen it before, this is a really good application for teachers to use with their students to collect data, to collect information on what they know. They can actually export all of that data into an Excel spreadsheet, which breaks down each student's name, what they answered on each question, and whether that was a correct or incorrect answer. So in every professional learning experience, we like to kind of use some strategies that teachers can also take back to the classroom. So we're going to start with a little Kahoot game. So if you have either a laptop or a cell phone, you can play with us. What you need to do is visit the website kahoot.it. So it's at the top of the screen here, kahoot.it. You just pull out your cell phone and connect. I'm going to pull the game up. Turn our sound on because that's part of the fun. Lost connection. Let's try again. Uh-oh, is our internet down? No, that's not connected. Let's see.
Maybe too many people.
I do have my mouse app, but it's not going to connect on the screen. The PH, your JCC PH. Let's try here. All right, let's try again. Thank you. So it's going to ask you to put in the game pin, and this is the game pin that you're going to enter, 549735. And then it's going to ask you to put in your name. So if you want to put your real name, you can put in name. That's fine. I'll in the classroom, we want our students to see your real names so we can see who's answering. See 4 people are connected, 7 people, 8 people. So if you're playing, try to make sure that your name's on there. Okay. Anybody still trying to connect? Raise your hand if you're still trying to connect. No? Okay, great. We'll get started now. So what you're going to see are questions and answers, and you're going to see shapes that correspond with the correct answers on your phone. So the first question, who's eligible for Title IIA services? Two seconds. Okay. So we can see the correct answers. Cecilia, do you want to explain?
I can't. I need to stand up.
Yeah. So the first question is, who is eligible for Title IIA services? And the correct answer is all school-based educators.
Okay, now this is a change from under No Child Left Behind. Under No Child Left Behind, only the core content teachers were eligible for Title IIA services. But now under ESSA, all school-based educators can receive Title IIA services. So that means if you're doing professional development for other teachers or other school-based educators who are not teaching the core subjects, they are also eligible for that professional development.
Right. So one of the fun things about this application is that it gives you a scoreboard, and the faster you answer, the more points you receive. So you can see that this really engages students when they see the scoreboard. Okay, next.
You tell we were educators.
You can be paid through Title IIA non-public funds. Okay. Celia, do you want to tell?
Okay, that question actually is talking about directly receiving the money. And actually the school and CJE cannot receive any money from the district who is funding who is providing Title II funds to your school. Only the educators or the vendors can be paid. So what that means is that if you're doing some kind of a school-wide professional development and you have a guest speaker coming in and the guest speaker needs to be paid, the LEA who is providing the funds for that particular Title IIA activity will have to pay the vendor directly, or an educator will have to pay the vendor and then get reimbursed. If you're talking about course reimbursement, if somebody's taking a course, then that educator would need to pay for the course and get reimbursed, or the LEA would have to pay the college itself. The LEAs are not allowed by federal guidelines to pay the school or to pay the organization, which in this case would be the Jewish Education Center.
Could you clarify and confirm that if someone wants to do professional development, but they're already on payroll, they're ineligible, or do they
Say that again. If somebody wants to do professional development, but I didn't hear the
they're on payroll?
on payroll.
So I understand that they can, but I want to know if that changed.
I don't know what you mean by on
Not be
payroll.
the presenter in the school that they're on payroll for.
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, no, they can't. If they are on, if you have a presenter
We have
who
a
is,
specialist in school that we want them to share with other educators.
they can't be paid for this. It's double dipping.
Is that true? It's not true.
No, it isn't. If it's after school or on a Saturday or a Sunday, then yes, they can get paid. But if they're doing it during school time, it's double dipping.
It's just a question outside their contractual law.
Right, it has to be outside the contractual hours in order for them to get paid. That's correct.
All right, are we ready for the
That was
next
a good question.
All right, next question. Do private schools carry over funding beyond the year in which it was distributed?
Okay, and the no's are correct. Most of you said no, and that is correct. The funding has to be spent within that calendar year. Now, different LEAs start that calendar year at different times. I will tell you that MSDE does not, and this is a Maryland thing, even though the federal government actually sends out the grant awards to the state in July for 25% of the Title IIA funds. The other 75% we get in October. None of the LEAs can start drawing on those funds until January, until after the board approves their plans. Their plans have to be approved. And they go through a whole approval process with us. So in the case of Title IIA, Dan and Heather would be reviewing all of the plans that are submitted by the different districts in the state. And once those districts are approved by them, then the next step is it goes to the board. The board approves the entire master plan, which contains all of the title federal grants. And then that money is released in January. Now, services can be provided before January, and then a reimbursement kind of thing can happen where the LEA is paying for it up front, but they don't get reimbursed until January. But those funds aren't actually released until January. So what your district, that is, whatever school district is in charge of your school, because from what I understand, you're in different districts. Some of you are in Baltimore City, some in Baltimore County, and I think there's a few in Montgomery County. Your district, most districts, have a calendar year of January through December, not a school calendar year. And that's the reason, because they can't actually get the funds from us until January. You had a question, sir?
Well, I'm in a county, Baltimore County. Baltimore County does not release the funds until after a meeting, which is usually held in October. So what happens is is that the beginning of the school year for many, many different schools is crunch time for professional development. And so the let's say the FY 18 year will conclude September 30th. But if you want to access funds for the upcoming year, FY 2019, they're not usually available. So at least 2 months into the school year on a practical level. There are many instances where I've requested, and they say that the state has not forwarded the money.
And that's why. What I just explained is why. That is correct.
There's no
However,
way-
there really is not. It's just the way our state, is the way the funding is set up for releasing through the state. The board approves it at the December board meeting, and then the funds are released in January. However, what you're supposed to do is when you do your budget, starting in January, you should be budgeting whatever funds you're getting. You should be budgeting from January through December to cover that fall time period. And I agree with you. Professional development usually occurs either in the summer or in the fall because you're gearing up for a new school year. So you've got to make sure that whatever funding you are allocated for FY18 carries you over until December. So you've got to do that forward planning. And that whole budget planning actually is a requirement now under ESSA, which wasn't a requirement before under NCLB. So and certainly the consultation that you described, where you have to meet with Baltimore County, and Baltimore County usually, in most cases, most counties, and I believe Baltimore County does do this as well, they hold one big consultation meeting with the non-publics where they talk about all of the Title funds, Title I, Title II, Title III, the new one is Title IV. And they should have told you this year, because this year was the first year that ESSA went into effect, that you had to provide them a professional development plan for how you were using those funds in a budget. And I would assume they did do that.
So you're saying that you work on the basis of the FY year, and you're generally for budgeting on a school year.
Yeah, well, yes. But the funding gets released in January, which is a calendar year.
That's what I meant. So
Yes.
in the fiscal year, so we have to think in terms, basically divided into years in essence. So if we budget from September to September.
Yes. And it is confusing. And the federal fiscal year is different from the state fiscal year. Not only is it different in the number, but it's also different in when it starts. Because the federal fiscal year starts on October 1st, and the state fiscal year starts on July 1st. And the federal fiscal year that's happening right now is FY17, but we're calling it FY18 at the state level. So there's a lot of confusion. It creates a lot of confusion.
Also, the month of December in Baltimore County is a blackout month for any type of mentoring. Because, so what happens is, instead of being able, that's a very important month. In our school and many of the schools that are present here, and they're not able to access any Title II funding during the month of December that has to relate to mentoring. If you're getting an outside consultant from the building, then that is something that can be done for you, escrowing the monies in advance. But for mentoring that's occurring within the building, it's a 4-week significant period when that's the need of the year, and that's a blackout.
So are you saying that Baltimore County provides mentoring?
They will not fund mentoring.
Okay, what do you mean by fund mentoring?
That they won't take your application, but you're not agreeing with me.
Yeah, it won't be funded.
What do you mean by fund mentoring? Do you mean they don't send in mentors to service you, or do you mean they won't be fund?
When you submit a proposal for Title IIA, you are delineating your professional development needs. So then when you actually implement it, then you submit the documentation and then you're compensated through it. That's how.
So they do a reimbursement kind of.
There's no reimbursement in the month.
Okay, what you would have to do, go ahead.
Yeah, I just work around.
And
You had November 30th, we started in January.
Well, I mean, one thing you could do is get an outside vendor, have them paid in advance to do the mentoring in that time frame. I mean, you're gonna have to find creative ways to work around
we
it.
do that.
But I would make sure that I talk to Baltimore County about that and explain to them that this is a hardship for you and see if there's anything they can do. There's not a whole lot we can do on the state level to change that process if they're doing it in their district. We are a locally controlled state, and they have to adhere to the federal rules and the state rules, regulations, but other than that, we are locally controlled.
You cannot get funding in advance. You have to have the activity. In other words, you can tell them.
You can pay a vendor in it. You're correct. It should be reimbursement, but you can pay a vendor in it. They can pay a vendor in advance. So if you have a guest speaker coming to do a presentation, that guest speaker can be paid in advance.
They will not, it's not accurate.
So they're paying the vendor after he or she does the
The
presentation.
school has to issue a document that said, okay to pay with the invoice from the vendor, with the date and the signature of the principal. Then they submit.
I guess they want to make sure the presentation took place and the
After
person
the event, yeah.
did not show up, but I can see why they're doing that. Okay. You really need to have that conversation with them. It's creating a hardship, you really do. And certainly, if there is a huge issue and you want us to be present, to be part of that conversation, we are willing to do that.
And I think Barb's gonna get into that in part of her
Yeah, Barb
presentation
is.
about, if there's disagreement about how the funds can be spent. There is a state selected individual who can mediate that. All right, so Cecilia stole a lot of my thunder for my couple of next questions.
Okay.
That's okay. All right, so our next, it's like Sandy's in
I've forgotten what the questions were.
Yeah. Sandy's running away here. Next question, what is the responsibility of the LEA? Did the internet just die again? Alright, it looks like our internet died again. Yes, that is. Here. Alright, so I guess what we can do is just kind of talk.
Maybe redo the.
It's gonna probably start us over. Did you guys all get kicked out too?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not kicked out, because the question, I slept in the net.
See, I have like an exclamation point next to my, see, it's like searching. There's no
It
internet
says no
access up here.
Okay, why don't you just.
That's okay, yeah. So, Cecilia, do you want to talk about, you already kind of did, the answers were, actually I can just pull it up, but the answers were the consultation, the funding, budget narrative. The answer was consultation. That's the responsibility.
That's
That you already talked about. Let me see if I can pull up.
We only have a couple
I think
questions.
we only have one more question anyway, so. All right, and then the responsibility of the school, the next question. And so the choices are needs assessment, budget and budget narrative, program evaluation, or all of the above. And the answer is all of the above. You want to talk about that?
Okay, what were the choices again?
Needs assessment, budget and budget narrative, and program evaluation.
Right, and those are new pieces under ESSA that you didn't have to do in the past and No Child Left Behind. Because the money is supposed to be based upon your student needs, so you need to make sure you're doing a needs assessment in your school. That is one of the questions that we did ask in the pre-survey before you came here. And some of you said you do a needs assessment, some of you said you don't. And there are lots of different ways of doing a needs assessment, and we can talk about that later in this presentation. But that is a new requirement. All of those three things are new requirements under ESSA for non-public schools. So you need to do a needs assessment. What you're doing for your professional development needs to be based upon your student needs. Not necessarily your teacher needs, but of course, in order to change student achievement, you're going to have to change teacher actions. So that's the way professional development works. You change teacher actions and teacher instruction in order to improve student needs. But you need to know what those student needs are in order to know what teacher actions need to be changed. So all of that ties together with the professional development and with the Title II funds. The other piece, of course, in that consultation, the LEA, the district should have given you some kind of a form or an application to complete or a template of some kind to complete in order for you to do your planning and your budget narrative and your budget. We are looking across the titles, across all the titles, to come up with some kind of a uniform template to assist so that if if you have, if an organization like this has schools in different districts. Archdiocese of Baltimore, Archdiocese of Washington, the same thing. So in order to provide some uniformity, we're going to see if we can come up with one suggested template for districts to use. Of course, it's up to them if they decide they want to use it. We are looking at that. So that is the last of our Kahoot questions, and I'm going
There
to
was one more.
Oh, what's that?
Yeah, allowable expenses.
Read question.
Okay, so the question was, which of these are allowable activities under Title IIA? And question 1 is providing lunch during a professional development workshop. Question 2 is a conference that provides secular content. Question 3 is a conference that provides non-secular content. And question 4 is answer 4 is all of the above. What are allowable activities under Title IIA?
Okay, the first choice on that was providing food, and you know that you can't provide food with Title IIA funds with any federal funds, which is an issue for me as well on the state level, because I hold statewide conferences and I cannot provide food, which drives me crazy.
I did just want to mention, though, that none of these free funds, Title IIA funds, the free funds are allowed to provide. We do. And that was the perfect September, I think, August, September solution for us. I know I'm thinking, because if we know we're going to be in this limbo state, the CJE and Crane has been amazing with those professional development.
That's wonderful. I wish I had something like that, because when I think I get professional development in the summer, I'm stuck. I have to find creative ways to do it. And it makes me pull my hair out. It drives me crazy. It's really driving me crazy right now, as my team knows for this coming summer's professional development that we're planning. The second choice was
Secular and non-secular content.
Okay, that's a change under ESSA as well. Under No Child Left Behind, if 50% or more of the content of a conference was secular, you could get the entire conference paid for out of Title IIA funds. Now, under ESSA, only the portion of the conference that is secular can be paid for. So if it is a conference that 50% of the content is secular and 50% is non-secular, Title IIA funds can only be used to pay for half of that registration. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is
That was
that
it. Yeah, that was the last question. So Sandy, you're our winner. Sandy. I know where Sandy is.
What other
Good
besides
job.
the conference? What other stuff besides the conference could be?
anything related to professional development that is going to improve teacher instruction, that's going to improve student achievement. So certainly conferences don't have a whole lot of research behind them to show that they really do improve teacher practice or even change teacher practice. So it would be better to do something, but we're not going to say you can't go to conferences. I love going to conferences, and sometimes I go to conferences, I get a lot out of it. Sometimes I go to conferences, I get nothing out of it, but you don't know that in advance. So certainly conferences are allowable, but one of the things under ESSA 2 is evidence-based strategies, and there's not a lot of evidence behind conferences and how much impact they have on teacher practice. So using things that have more impact on teacher practice would make more sense. Programs, if there's some kind of a program that you want to institute in your schools, say a new curriculum or a new intervention strategy or something, the training for that can come from Title IIA funds, because the training for that is professional development. As far as materials are concerned, you can't use it to buy books and things for students, but you can provide books and even technology for the participants of your professional development. So if you're holding a professional development and there's a certain tool that is needed or a certain book that is needed or a sample textbook of what they're going to be teaching to their students, you can buy one for everybody who attends that professional development, but you can't buy it for teachers who do not attend that professional development. So I mean, just kind of think outside the box.
And we actually have a slide on some of the commonly some of the common allowable activities that a lot of the districts spend their funds on. So we'll get a little bit more into that, I think, as the presentation goes on.
Okay, I'm going to introduce Barb Shear. Barb is, as we said, is our ombudsman. So she is the person who is the liaison between the Maryland State Department of Ed and our LEAs with the non-public schools. So she is probably the one that you're going to be most likely to contact if there's an issue with the district. But if it's a specific Title IIA district issue, you certainly are welcome to contact me as well or anybody on our team. There is a slide in here that contains all of our contact information in it. So you're welcome to do that as well. we are very willing to help you in any way we can help you. And we want to do that. We want to support you. So Barb, I know we're trying to pronounce it wrong.
Good morning, both your toe. I'm happy to be here this morning and just share a little bit about some of the work that I do at the Maryland State Department of Education. I wish I had one job, but none of us have one job, one responsibility. We
Wouldn't that be nice?
multiple hats. So I am new in this role as the Equitable Services Ombudsman, and it's been a huge learning curve, and this is a new responsibility under the Every Student Succeeds Act. In addition to serving as the Equitable Services Ombudsman, I work with Title I. How many of you participate in Title I services? Okay. So I work with each of our 24 LEAs across Title I and also with Equitable Services. I also serve as the point of contact for Title I for Baltimore City and a couple of other LEAs. So there are some cases that we're familiar to have been to some of their consultation meetings. And in addition, I also do family engagement. So I do family engagement more specifically as it relates to Title I, but also some more general work in the area of capacity with educators and our families. So here we are talking about Title II and equitable services. How many of you participate in Title II? A lot of you seem like you know a lot of the information. So some of this may be information that you already know, and I'm just going to share some general brushstroke things around equitable services. Do you want to do the dance for you? Yeah. No. So first, okay. So for equitable services, schools that are eligible to participate, as you know, are schools that are defined as a nonprofit institutional day or residential school that provide elementary and secondary education as determined under the state. So if you've never been to the Maryland State Department of Education's website, there is a page for non-public schools, and there is a list of approved non-public schools and church-exempt schools, Montessori schools. So these are all the schools that have either been certified by the Maryland State Department of Education or are registered in Maryland as a private non-public school. And the services for equitable services are only for nonprofit schools. So who benefits from equitable services? For Title II purposes, our teachers benefit, administrators benefit, but ultimately it's the students who benefit. So the goal of equitable services is really to support students who are academically in need or who may be failing. So the additional supplemental support that we provide to educators to help our students is the goal that we try to achieve. So what is the key to equitable services is that C word, consultation. So the consultation, as many of you know, and I'm not really sure where to stand because I'm sorry. So consultation requires a lot of different things, and it can look different across programs. Those of you who participate in Title I, that consultation may be occurring every single month. In Title II, it may be happening several times a year. I don't know if there's anyone who participates in Title III or even Title IV-A. So those conversations may look different throughout the year. But the goal of consultation is to come to an agreement of how the services are going to be delivered, where the services will be delivered, when the services will be delivered. So there must be timely and meaningful consultation. So the consultation, of course, has to occur prior to the services actually taking place, right? So it needs to be in a timely manner so you can plan accordingly, and it must be something that is a two-way dialogue between the LEA and the private school official. And the LEA is responsible for planning and designing the program, like Cecilia mentioned earlier. It's the LEA's program, ultimately, but it's supporting the needs of the private schools. So, let's see. Okay. So as I mentioned, timely consultation must take place before any decision is made. And that conversation is really looking at the design and the development of the services that will be provided, and it should be an ongoing process. So this really gives you a nice picture of that ongoing consultation. And for Title II, which falls under Title VIII and the uniform provisions. So we have Title I, which has its own requirements and regulations, and then we have Title VIII, the uniform provisions. Under Title VIII includes Title IIA, Title III, Title IVA. And with those particular programs, there are very specific areas or topics of consultation that must occur. And I think Heather just handed you what those topics are. So as you're having consultation with your LEAs, these are the topics that need to be addressed, including when, where, how the services are going to be delivered, and based on your needs. Right? And again, those conversations should be happening throughout the year. Typically, what you'll see, and as you know, probably sometime in maybe February or March, you'll be attending the big meeting of all the federal programs. So the LEA will be sending you a letter probably in November, December, with the intention of participating. Does that sound right? Maybe even sooner. And then they will have their big meeting with all the federal programs, probably in the February, March timeframe. And that's when you learn about all of the different programs, based on your needs and your interests. Then there will be those additional consultation between the local school system and you to determine the types of services. Any questions so far? Yes.
So does that mean you require for those people?
Is it required for the LEA to school? Yes, it is. And if you cannot attend, but you're interested in participating, you'll need to let the LEA know that you're interested in participating so there can be some follow-up to this meeting. But consultation is required. So how many of you are familiar with the funding options? Only individual, school by school. So based on how you decide to use your allocation, you have two options. You can either use your allocation to support your own individual school needs, or you can pool your funds together. So with pooling funds together, it almost maximizes the kind of supports and the services that you can receive. Do you have people here in the schools?
City pools.
City pools, okay. Can you go to the next slide? So, so when you're pooling your funds, typically what happens is some of the schools will come together to say, we want to pool all of our funds together, because rather than our school, which we may get an allocation of about $1,000, and if we have several schools, some schools might get 1,000, some might get 2,000, whatever their allocation may be. If you pool all of these funds together, you have a larger pot of money that you're working with, so it maximizes the number of folks who can really benefit from those services. Make sense? So this is a topic of consultation that must be discussed across all federal programs.
Okay, this is, I think I pretty much already covered this. Payments from LEAs who can be paid, the educator, the teacher, the principal, et cetera, the vendor, which is the college or the conference organization, who cannot be paid. The school cannot be paid. The overarching organization, such as the Center for Jewish Education, Archdiocese of Baltimore, Archdiocese of Washington, they cannot receive direct payment. Only an educator or a vendor. You can't see the screen side, but it's not up here. So basically, this slide is showing you the services that are provided, and the guidance. This comes right from the federal website. You can find this yourself as far as the guidance is concerned, and it can be used for improving knowledge in core academic. This is core academic subjects. That's an old. Well, you fixed it. Okay. Well, your PowerPoint, I think, says core, but it isn't core anymore. As I mentioned earlier, under SI, it is all school-based educators, which would be all subject areas, not just core. So this is just some examples of things that are in the guidance that you can use for finding core. So you can use it for integrate. You can do professional learning on integrating technology. You can do it on teaching students with different needs, differentiation, disabilities, and DLL students. Methods for improving student behavior, identifying early interventions involving parents. Leadership development and management, use of data and assessments to improve instruction and student outcomes. Those are just some examples of some of the things that you can use to find it. Go ahead.
You're back.
No. I can't see what's the next slide.
So disagreement. We hope that there isn't any disagreement. But if there should be any disagreement, and this is new under ESSA, this particular piece, is that if there is disagreement, if the LEA disagrees with the private school officials in some things that they want to do or things that they're asking for, the LEA must put that in writing to the private school official. But ultimately, depending on what the issues are, the LEA has final decision on the programs. So the state complaint process. Are you all familiar with your local school system's complaint process? That is another area that is typically reviewed when you have your consultations. But I'd like to see some hands up. So if there should be a complaint, what happens is when that complaint is made, the state has 45 days to get back to the private school, or if it's a teacher, whoever has made that complaint, and then we have 90 days after that to resolve any complaints. So this is where the role of the state ombudsman comes in. So when there are issues, when there are questions, when there are concerns, I can be your go-to person. I work closely with each of the federal leads at MSDE, and it's my role to respond to questions if you have them, if there are concerns, if you're dissatisfied with the way things are going, I would be the person that you would contact. And then I will try to work with the private school and the local school system to come to resolution. It's also my responsibility to visit each of the LEAs and monitor the implementation of equitable services. So,
Okay, I think in the interest of time, we're going to skip the table talk. It's okay. I'm going to run you.
oh, okay. Just real quick, if you visit the Maryland State Department of Education's website, the easiest way to find the information about the ombudsman, there's information about allocations, contact with each of the federal programs. If you just put in the search bar, Equitable Services Ombudsman or Equitable Services, it will take you right to that website.
Although we are skipping the table talk, we do want to know if you still have questions. And on your tables, there are some post-it notes. If a question comes up or something that you haven't heard yet that you need to hear more information about, write it down on the post-it note. And in a few minutes, you'll have a chance to put on the parking lot in the back there. We'll check the parking lot and we'll try to address those questions before we leave today. If we don't get to them today, we'll somehow get the answers to you through you or some of them. Thank you. The post-it notes are on your table.
And these are the points of contact for Title II in all of the LEAs, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, and Montgomery County. This information is also on the handout that I distributed to you, and then also our points of contact at the state level for Title II. Yes.
Related services with the village schools receive speech and auditory services for children who are deaf, who are determining services. Under what that strictly state grant or does it provide through to the discussion?
There's probably actually in our system on site. That's only because
The service itself, the state services.
I think under special education, there are state services for that. There's a special education division in our organization, and if we need to contact with them, we can certainly put you in touch with them. As far as Title II is concerned, you could do some professional development with teachers in dealing with students who have those issues, but you wouldn't be able to use the Title II funds for.
Okay, I understand you talked about Title VIII, and under Title VIII, there's an umbrella of services. You talked about Title I, and what that's.
Title I schools, and I don't know a lot about Title I, Barb knows that better, but Title I schools can receive services.
They receive services for students who are
I'm just trying to get the original source of related services, where's that coming from? We have consultation usually once a year from MSDE and Baltimore County. Identify the original sources that's in whatever federal.
I think it depends on the funding you're using, so certainly, I mean, if you're getting funding from Title I for Title I school for that, then that would be federal. But if it's special education, they could have other funding sources that are not federal.
This is part of the, I think, part of the IEP process, where that funding comes from.
Which
And
may be
that's
special
what triggers
education.
the
State
state,
and
doesn't
district,
include
yeah.
the LEA, but it's specifically talking about sort of on-to related services, on-site in junior schools. Nobody else gets those. That's an MSDE fund.
But this is the IEP. Yes.
You can hold up this, if you have a sticky note, you can hold it up rather than have it maybe on the parchment if you want. We did have a question, they came to us from the sticky note activity. Can Title II funds be used for standardized testing and scoring, not for actually doing the scoring or the administration of standardized tests, but certainly for training teachers in scoring and training teachers in administering tests? Keep in mind, it's gotta be training, it's gotta be professional development.
That happens outside of the typical school day for example.
If you're gonna pay teachers, you would have to have counsel. So that you don't do double dipping. So any professional development that you're paying teachers to attend would have to have it after school or on the weekend, outside of their contracted hours. Yes.
I just have a request, maybe even in webinar form. Title 4A, new, continuing,
Well, it is new, it just started under ESSA.
right?
And I don't know if Barb wants to address that, but it just depends upon funding.
I'm just asking if Amy would consider allowing us to participate in a webinar where we can understand it better. Because the way it was presented to us, I don't think I got the most out of it, and I want it.
I can address that.
Right.
So, we do have an equitable services law partners group that, just started meeting, and that's actually the topic that was requested to have a webinar on. So we will probably be planning something for May, maybe April, May. But in the meantime, I do, I can connect to our other contacts.
I just want to maximize the funds, and I felt like the directives were so not clear.
It's so new, and it's a process that we're all learning
And
together.
I have to say that if you contact, it's really great.
Extremely
Kim has been very, very helpful.
They help
City?
us.
I got the money. I just think I could have done more with it if I had been on
If you knew what was allowable, there's a lot of stuff allowable.
a lot, right?
And as Barb said, it's so new, it's brand new, we are all just learning. And the girl at MSD who's spearheading the Title IV has never been involved with the titles of federal grants before, so she's learning. So, we're all learning together.
So we would get in touch with the LEA point of contact.
Get in touch with the LEA point of contact, and then if you need more, we can certainly put you in touch with the person at MSD. And again, Barb is the liaison for all the titles, with non-public. So Barb is a good point of contact.
Is there a group that we're not aware of that we could be part of just by email?
Yeah. Yeah, are you familiar with the non-public work group at the State Department of Education, maybe twice a year?
No.
Amy, if I send you
Very few
that
schools.
information, maybe you can.
Very few
send
schools.
Yeah. The non-public network is a great source of collaboration, like together. Many people were involved, so.
I'd love to know. Thank you.
We got an email from the state.
So we'll send that, and we'll send follow-up information.
And what's the funding cycle for Title IV?
It's all the titles are the same, because it's the way because all of the titles go under our Maryland master plan. And so there's a master plan, and then there are attachments to the master plan for each title. Now that process we are looking at that to revise it, streamline and make it better, maybe we put it online. But right now, that's what we do. And all of that whole master plan goes to the board for approval in December. All of the funding is released in January. So it's the same funding cycle for all.
We need to get it together now for next.
Yeah, you really need to be thinking.
Doing anything. So we think about that consultation process, because when we say we're planning a year in advance, those conversations while you're implementing your program now, to also be thinking about what your needs are for next year.
And this is the spring. It doesn't feel like the spring, but it is the spring. We're coming into the end of this month. Month is the first official day of spring. So it really is a good time, as you said, to start planning for next year. You don't want to wait to the last minute because then you're not going to put together a good plan. You really want to start doing those needs assessments, send out surveys, look at your data, look at your student assessment scores, look at the needs of the students, and then decide what your professional development needs are for your staff, and start making those plans now so that when the non-public, so that when the public districts contact you, you are ready with your plan and with your budget, and just maybe a little tweaking that needs to be done, but you're not starting from scratch. And you're not rushing to do it last minute, which I suspect you probably were last year because it's all the requirements you weren't expecting.
But 4A sounds like it's for students, for special
There's three different parts to 4A.
There are lots of parts.
Right.
Some of it can be used for students.
It sounds like we need to get more information really back out to you.
And I don't know how often you all meet, but maybe Danielle does 4A and Shamar can come back and do a presentation on that.
Do you have any idea of findings of the Title II funding this next year? We're talking here this next year when they told us they don't really receiving the funding.
Well, there's all that controversy happening federally because you probably know the president's skinny budget cut out Title II completely. Congress put it back in. There's talk that it could be cut, the president could cut it again. Nobody really knows. At this point, I've not heard anything from the feds regarding it being cut. I will tell you, and I will probably talk for another 15 minutes on budget, and I can show you some more slides, that as a result of ESSA, the formula was done differently. And the formula for us receiving our state Title II funds used to be based on a combination of school enrollment and a combination of numbers of students in poverty. And every year for the next 7 years, that formula is changing to swing. It used to be higher numbers. The formula used to be based more on total numbers of students and less on total numbers of students in poverty. And now it's shifting so that it's going to be based more on students in poverty. And over the next 7 years, that shift is happening. And even though we certainly have a lot of poverty in Maryland, we are not a poor state. We have pockets of poverty, but we are not a poor state. So some states, as a result of that shift in the formula, are getting more Title IIA funding, and some states like Maryland are getting less. So every year, we are getting a little less federal funding for Title II than we've gotten previously. Last year, when we still had No Child Left Behind in effect, we received $32 million as a state overall. This year, when ESSA went into effect, we received $29 million as a state. Every year, that's going to go down for the next 10 years, actually, because I don't know if you're familiar with the whole harm list with the Eisenhower Act. That also is going out of effect. So the double whammy of the Eisenhower Act being phased out over 10 years and the change in the formula being phased in over 7 years is creating issues with the amount of funding that we're receiving. So our amount of funding is going down every year, basically for the next 10 years, but the biggest hits are going to hit in the first 7 years. So you will get less funding next year than you got this year. How much less, I don't know, because I have not gotten those numbers from the feds yet, and I won't get those numbers probably before the end of May. Actually probably before June. I usually get the funding comes out July 1, and I usually get those numbers within a couple of weeks of when it comes out, and then I get the actual grant award on July 1. So, I wish I could tell you more, but it will be a little less, hopefully not a whole lot less. One advantage that did happen for you with the change in the formulas and this change in the guidance for non-publics is that it used to be that your Title IIA funding only came from the percent of funding that was used by the district for professional development. So you didn't get funding from the whole pot that the LEA got for Title II. You only got it from the portion they were using for professional development. Because LEAs can use it for class size reduction, for hired coaches and mentors. They have other things they can use it for that you can't use it for. So there are districts that use it more for that kind of thing, and so the percentage that you got was only from the professional development bucket, which was only a smaller percentage of their whole bucket, if I'm making any sense. Now, under ESSA, they have to give you funding based upon their whole bucket, minus administrative costs. So once they take out the administrative costs, which is a capital that they can take out after that, and they take out their indirect costs, you have to get an allocation from that entire bucket instead of just the PD portion. So that's a good thing for you. So you should have gotten more money this year than you've gotten in the past as a result of that changing. Although Baltimore City and Baltimore County do spend most of their funds for PD and not for class size reduction, so it may not have been as big a change in those districts. But there are some districts, especially small districts, that really use the funding to hire teachers because they just use those strategies. Small districts don't have the money.
Could you say more about that class size reduction?
Well, you can't use it that way. That's not an option. It's an option for an LEA. It also is something that is frowned upon, and the feds, we really thought the feds were going to take it out of the allowable activities this year, or for ESSA, but they didn't. I think the reason they did is because states were pushing back on it. There's not a lot of evidence that reducing the size of class size by adding more teachers and reducing class size does improve instruction and does improve student achievement. There is no evidence of that. So it's something that we don't encourage. But there are some of our smaller districts who do that purpose because it is an allowable activity for the district. It's not an allowable activity. And that's federal guidelines. That's got nothing to do with the state. Don't beat me up on that. Okay, sorry we ran over.
You did great. I really first want to express our appreciation.